1:33 a.m. Penghu Islands, Taiwan Strait. 23 degrees north latitude, 119 degrees east longitude. The Penghu archipelago sits 50 kilometers west of Taiwan's main island, in the center of the strait. It has been garrisoned continuously since 1945. Its garrison today operates 3 batteries of U.S.-supplied Harpoon, Block II anti-ship missiles, 2 batteries of U.S.-supplied HIMARS multiple rocket launchers loaded with ATACMS, and a Patriot PAC-3 MSE fire unit that had been delivered 18 months earlier in the final weeks before the strait's political temperature made additional deliveries diplomatically untenable. The islands are 50 kilometers from Taiwan. They are 70 kilometers from the Chinese mainland coast. From a military perspective, the Penghu garrison is a blade positioned at the throat of any amphibious force transiting the strait's central channel. From a political perspective, it is the reason every operational planning exercise for a Taiwan Strait crossing had, for 14 years, assigned the first wave of fires specifically to suppress the Penghu positions before any landing ship entered the strait's central zone. At 1:33 a.m., that suppression sequence activated. From positions along the Fujian coast and from pre-positioned artillery islands in the Taiwan Strait, 112 DF-11A short-range ballistic missiles were launched against the Penghu garrison in a time-on-target sequence calculated to arrive simultaneously across all 3 missile battery positions and the HIMARS emplacements. Simultaneously, 47 CJ-10 land attack cruise missiles routing at terrain-following altitude were aimed at the Penghu radar infrastructure and the command node that coordinated the garrison's fires with Taiwan's main island defense architecture. The Penghu Patriot battery had 48 interceptors and a single fire unit. Against 112 ballistic missiles and 47 cruise missiles arriving simultaneously, the mathematics were worse than anything the Patriot had faced in any other engagement in this series. The battery's triage algorithm had never been stress-tested against an input of this density. It allocated, as designed, priority to the highest threat tracks approaching the missile battery positions. PAC-3 MSE engagements against the DF-11A trajectories. Shored mode against the CJ-10 cruise missile tracks that penetrated to close range. The battery expended its full 48-round ready load in 7 minutes and 41 seconds. Of 112 DF-11A launches, 31 intercepted by PAC-3 MSE. 81 impacted across the Penghu garrison. Both Harpoon battery positions were struck. 1 HIMARS battery was struck. The command node received 4 DF-11A impacts. The Patriot battery's radar array sustained fragmentation damage from a DF-11A impact 60 meters distant. The radar continued functioning at degraded sensitivity. The Penghu garrison's anti-ship fires capability had been reduced in the first 8 minutes of the operation. The blade at the throat of the strait's central channel had been significantly dulled, but not eliminated. The Harpoon battery at Penghu's eastern position had been struck by 2 DF-11A warheads. The launchers were non-operational. The fire control system was non-operational. The 18 Harpoon missiles in storage tubes at that position were intact. The warheads had struck the launcher infrastructure, not the sealed storage tubes. A Harpoon in a sealed storage tube survives substantial overpressure. The ROC Army's anti-ship battery crew, emerging from their hardened shelter positions after the last impact, assessed the situation at 1:42 a.m. Launchers destroyed, fire control destroyed, 18 missiles intact in undamaged storage. The battery technical sergeant had been through the damage assessment protocol in 3 exercises. He had never been through it after a real strike. He made the assessment in 4 minutes and transmitted it to the garrison commander. The garrison commander had a decision. Could those 18 Harpoons be fired without their assigned launcher and fire control system? The answer was technically yes. The Harpoon's storage tube contained a portable launch capability that was designed for exactly this contingency. With manual targeting input through a handheld interface, that allowed degraded mode firing against a target whose coordinates were known. The accuracy was degraded. Against a 100-meter landing ship at 40 kilometers range, degraded accuracy was still operationally effective. The garrison commander authorized the portable launch mode at 1:47 a.m. The first Harpoon left its storage tube at 1:52 a.m. The plan's operational plan had not accounted for portable launch mode from a battery whose launcher infrastructure had been assessed as destroyed. This was the first of 4 instances in the engagement where an element the plan's model had assessed as eliminated continued to generate effects. The broader defensive picture on Taiwan's main island had been processing simultaneously with the Penghu suppression. The Republic of China Air Force had been flying F-16V combat air patrols in 3 rotations continuously for 11 days, since the intelligence assessment had elevated the crossing probability to imminent. At 1:33 a.m., with the Penghu suppression fires visible on radar as the DF-11A launches lit up the strait, the CAP rotation that was currently airborne, 4 F-16V aircraft, was vectored by the E-2K Hawkeye, orbiting over the Taiwan Strait's eastern approaches toward the Strait's central zone. The F-16V's AN/APG-83AESA radar had a detection range against the DF-11A launch signatures of approximately 180 kilometers. The 4 aircraft had acquired the inbound tracks at 1:34 a.m. and had been building targeting solutions since, not for the Penghu suppression fires, which were inbound ballistic missiles that the F-16V's AIM-120D could not engage in terminal phase with favorable geometry, but for the CJ-10 cruise missiles routing at low altitude across the strait. Between 1:37 a.m. and 1:52 a.m., the 4 F-16Vs engaged the CJ-10 package. Of 47 CJ-10 cruise missiles, 19 were intercepted by AIM-120D engagements at ranges between 30 and 80 kilometers from the Penghu Islands. 28 continued toward Penghu and were engaged at terminal range by the Patriot battery's remaining interceptors before the battery expended its load. The Patriot battery had used 12 of its 48 interceptors against the CJ-10 package and 36 against the DF-11A package before exhausting its load. Against 28 CJ-10 that reached terminal range after the F-16-5 interceptions, 12 PAC-3 MSE achieved 9 intercepts. 19 CJ-10 impacted on Penghu. The Penghu radar infrastructure sustained 7 direct CJ-10 impacts. The Central Command node, already struck by DF-11A, received 3 additional CJ-10 impacts. The command node was assessed as non-operational at 1:46 a.m. The fires from Penghu were now operating without central coordination, but operating. The HIMARS battery that had not been struck, Battery B at the northeastern tip of the islands, had been in a hardened revetment when the suppression fires arrived. Its crew had received the mass attack warning at 1:30 a.m., 3 minutes before the first DF-11A launched, and had completed their shelter protocol. At 1:49 a.m., with the last incoming tracks confirmed clear, the HIMARS crew emerged and began their system activation sequence. Battery B had 4 HIMARS vehicles with a combined load of 24 ATACMS ballistic missiles. The ATACMS M48 variant has a range of 300 kilometers and carries a unitary 230 kilogram warhead. From the Penghu Islands at 23 degrees north latitude, 300 kilometers of range covered the entire Fujian coastal zone, every port facility from Fuzhou to Xiamen, and most critically, the Type 071 and Type 075 landing ships that the plan's crossing Echelon was now moving from their staging ports. The crew established communication with the ROC Army's Fires Coordination Cell on Taiwan's main island at 1:51 a.m. through a backup satellite communication link. The primary fiber optic link to the main island had been severed by the CJ-10 strikes on the command node. The satellite link was slower. It was functional. The first ATACMS was fired at 1:54 a.m. Its target, the Quanzhou port staging area, where 14 Type 075 landing helicopter dock ships had been identified by the ROC military's intelligence picture as the leading departure echelon. At a range of 280 kilometers, the ATACMS flight time was approximately 4.5 minutes. 14 Type 075 landing ships, each carrying between 900 and 1,200 troops and their equipment, were in the final stages of their departure sequence when the first ATACMS impacted the staging area at 1:59 a.m. The ATACMS's unitary warhead is not a ship-killing weapon against a steel-hulled vessel. Against a ship in a confined port, surrounded by pier infrastructure, fuel lines, and the mechanical equipment that supports an amphibious departure sequence, a 230-kilogram warhead at the pier's edge produces structural damage to the pier itself, disables the fuel transfer connections, and creates the specific type of confusion that interrupts a complex departure sequence that requires precise timing. The 14 Type 075s were not sunk. 3 of the 14 were moved away from their intended departure positions by the damage and confusion generated by the first 2 ATACMS impacts on the Quanzhou pier complex. 3 of 14 delayed. The plan's crossing timeline required all 14 simultaneously to maintain the formation density that protected the crossing force from submarine engagement during transit. 3 ships delayed meant 3 gaps in the formation. The ROC Army's Fires Coordination Cell transmitted the 3rd ATACMS targeting update at 2:01 a.m. Remaining ATACMS in Battery B's load, 22. The cell continued firing. The main island's own anti-ship fires were the 3rd element of the integrated defense. The ROC Army's Coast Defense Command operated 12 batteries of Xiongfeng, 3 supersonic anti-ship missiles from hardened positions along Taiwan's western coast. The Xiongfeng 3 is a Taiwanese-developed system with a range of 400 kilometers, a Mach 2 terminal sprint, and a 225-kilogram warhead. The batteries had been in continuous elevated readiness for 11 days. At 1:33 a.m., the moment the Penghu suppression fires began, all 12 batteries received the crossing initiation confirmation and began their pre-launch procedures. The first Xiongfeng 3 launch occurred at 1:48 a.m. Targeting: the planned surface combatant escort formation that had sortied from Xiamen Naval Base ahead of the landing ships, currently identified at 22 degrees north latitude on a southwest heading that would bring it into optimal escort positioning for the crossing force. 47 Xiongfeng, 3 missiles from 8 of the 12 batteries, the other 4 holding for the landing ships themselves, were in flight by 1:52 a.m. The plan escort formation's Type 05 2D destroyers and Type 055 cruisers had been expecting this response. Their HHQ-9 long-range SAM systems were in full active search posture. The crossing operation had begun with a Xiongfeng 3 suppression sequence as its second priority fire mission after the Penghu garrison. But the ROC Army's batteries, in hardened positions dispersed across Taiwan's western mountain terrain, had been significantly harder to locate and suppress than the fixed Penghu positions. The plan's opening fires had neutralized 4 of 12 Xiongfeng 3 batteries through a combination of pre-surveyed position data and real-time radar trackback from the escort formation's fire control systems. 8 batteries had survived to fire. Of 47 Xiongfeng 3, 29 intercepted by the escort's HHQ-9 and HHQ-16 systems during approach. 18 reached the escort formation's inner defense zone. CIWS and CRAM engaged. 11 were neutralized. 7 impacted surface combatants. 2 Type 05 2D destroyers received Xiongfeng 3 impacts, 1 on each ship's superstructure. Both remained underway at degraded capacity. 1 Type 055 cruiser received an impact on its VLS forward deck area. The detonation disabled the forward VLS module and caused fires that the ship's damage control team managed within 17 minutes. The cruisers after VLS and propulsion were unaffected. The escort formation was degraded. It was advancing. At 2:09 a.m., the F-16V Combat Air Patrol's first rotation was recovering to base with their AIM-120D load expended. The second rotation, 4 additional F-16Vs, was airborne and receiving their assignment from the E-2K Hawkeye. Their priority, the Type 022 missile boats that the plan had forward deployed to the Strait's northern channel as a suppression element against the ROCS Navy's submarine force. The Type 022 carried C-801K anti-ship missiles and had been operating in groups of 6 to force the ROCS Navy's 2 combat-capable diesel submarines to remain submerged and passive rather than prosecuting the landing ships. The F-16V's AGM-84 Harpoon missiles against the Type 022 fast missile boats, a weapon-to-target match that the plan's planners had assessed as low probability given the Type 022's speed, 50+ knots, and maneuverability. The F-16V crews did not engage with Harpoon against the maneuvering Type 022. They engaged with GBU-39/B small-diameter bombs from altitude, using the SDB's glide range to stay outside the Type 022's C-801K engagement envelope, while placing weapons against the less maneuverable forward groups. Of 11 Type 022 boats in the Northern Channel, 4 were rendered non-operational by SDB strikes between 2:09 a.m. and 2:24 a.m. 7 remained operational, but had been displaced from their suppression patrol positions by the air engagement. Their commanders had maneuvered aggressively to avoid the SDB threat, and had, in doing so, opened a passive corridor for the ROC submarine ROCS Hai Lung. ROCS Hai Lung was a Zwaardvis-class diesel-electric submarine that had been commissioned in 1988. It was not a modern vessel. Its sonar suite was less capable than a contemporary SSK. Its maximum submerged speed was 11 knots. It had been operating in the Northern Strait's deeper water since the elevated alert had been issued and had been passive and patient, waiting for the Type 022 suppression screen to develop the gap that the F-16V engagement had just created. At 2:27 a.m., with the gap in the Type 022 screen confirmed by acoustic observation of the boat's repositioning, ROCS Hai Lung fired a Mark 48 torpedo at the largest acoustic contact in range. The contact was a Type 071 landing platform dock ship, 25,000 tons, carrying 800 troops, 4 landing craft, and 15 helicopters, that had been the 7th ship in the departure sequence from Quanzhou, and was now crossing the Strait's central channel. The torpedo acquisition was confirmed at 2:32 a.m. By minute 41 of the engagement, the United States had committed 3 specific assets: the E-2K Hawkeye, which was a U.S.-supplied and U.S.-maintained early warning platform; the ATACMS rounds from Battery B, which had been delivered as part of the security assistance package; the Harpoon missiles fired from storage tube portable mode, also U.S.-supplied. Everything else was the Republic of China military operating U.S.-designed systems with ROC crews, who had been training on them for between 3 and 12 years. No U.S. carrier strike group had entered the Strait. No U.S. surface combatant had fired. No U.S. submarine had prosecuted a target. The F-16V aircraft were ROC Air Force aircraft with ROC pilots. The question that the plan's operational model had assigned a specific probability to was whether the ROC military could sustain effective defensive fires in the Strait for a sufficient period to prevent the crossing from achieving its lodgment timeline. The model had assessed that probability at 31%, weighted heavily on the assumption that Penghu's fires would be eliminated in the opening suppression sequence, and that the Xiangfeng 3 batteries would be progressively neutralized over the crossing's 4-hour timeline. The Penghu portable launch mode had not been in the model. The ATACMS fires against the Quanzhou staging area had been assigned a lower probability of effectiveness. The Hai Lung's positioning had been modeled, but with lower confidence in the ROC submarine force's ability to find and exploit a screen gap under combat conditions. 3 elements the model had underweighted. All 3 were currently generating effects. At 2:44 a.m., the ROC Air Force's ground-based air defense network detected a mass launch from the Fujian interior. A second suppression sequence aimed at the surviving Xiongfeng 3 batteries and the ATACMS positions on Penghu. The plan had adapted to the fires it had been receiving. Its second sequence was heavier and specifically targeted the capabilities that had survived the first. 73 DF-15B ballistic missiles. Against 4 surviving Xiongfeng, 3 batteries, and the HIMARS Battery B on Penghu. The ROC's Tiankong 3 ground-based air defense system engaged the DF-15B package from 7 battery positions distributed across Taiwan's western mountain spine. The Tiankong 3 had been optimized over 15 years of incremental upgrade for exactly the DF-15B threat category. A short-range maneuvering ballistic missile at the range bands from which the Fujian interior could reach Taiwan. Its engagement probability per shot against the DF-15B had been measured in 7 live-fire exercises at between 67% and 81%. The Patriot PAC-3 MSE battery on Penghu had been in reload since 2:12 a.m. Its first reload container had been pre-positioned in a hardened shelter 200 meters from the battery's launch unit. The reload was not complete when the second suppression sequence arrived at 2:51 a.m. The battery had 31 interceptors loaded and operational when the DF-15B tracks appeared on its radar. Of 73 DF-15B launches, 41 intercepted by Tiankong, 3 across the 7 batteries. 11 intercepted by the partially reloaded Patriot, PAC-3. 21 impacted. Battery B on Penghu received 3 direct hits. The HIMARS vehicles were destroyed. The ATACMS fires from Penghu ceased at 2:54 a.m. Battery B had fired 19 of its 24 ATACMS before being struck. The 4 surviving Xiongfeng, 3 batteries on the main island, received a combined 11 DF-15B impacts. 2 batteries were rendered non-operational. 2 sustained damage but retained partial firing capability. 3 of 4 launchers each, operating on backup fire control. The plan's second suppression sequence had achieved the objective the first had not fully accomplished. Penghu's fires were now stopped. The Xiongfeng 3 surviving capacity was at half its post-first sequence level, but the Hai Lung was still running its torpedo. At 2:56 a.m., 29 minutes after firing, the Mk-48's active sonar seeker acquired the Type 071 landing ship. The torpedo had been running on a passive approach course, transitioning to active guidance in the final phase. The Type 071 had been maneuvering. The crossing formation had implemented an anti-torpedo zigzag pattern at 2:19 a.m., when the presence of a ROC submarine in the operational zone had been confirmed by PLANASW helicopter acoustic detection. The zigzag had not brought the Type 071 outside the Mark 48's seeker acquisition envelope. Detonation at 2:56 a.m. The Type 071 sustained a keel strike. The Mark 48 had acquired the ship from below and impacted in the region of maximum hull stress. The ship's keel was fractured. Progressive flooding was immediate and not controllable by the ship's damage control resources. The Type 071 was assessed as non-survivable at 3:04 a.m. The crossing formation's escort had a major search and rescue task added to their operational mission. 3:11 a.m. ROC Air Force Air Operations Center, Hsinchu Air Base, Taiwan. The operations watch had been running continuous engagements for 98 minutes. The display showed a crossing formation that was damaged, delayed, and reduced, but still advancing. 12 Type 071 and Type 075 landing ships remained in the transit corridor and were projected to reach the western coast landing zones at approximately 5:30 a.m. allowing for the delays and the reduced transit speed caused by the escort's damage control operations. The ROC's defensive fires had not stopped the crossing. They had delayed it by approximately 47 minutes from the original planned timeline projection, had reduced the landing force's initial echelon from 14 ships to 12, had cost the plan one Type 071 and damaged 3 surface combatants, and had consumed a significant portion of the escort formation's SAM magazine during the Shungfeng 3 engagement. A crossing that arrived 47 minutes late, with 86% of its intended force, was not a failed crossing. It was a degraded crossing. The difference between a degraded crossing and a failed crossing was the U.S. carrier response. The carriers that were not yet in the strait, that were 18 hours of transit time away from effective engagement range, and that the plan's operational timeline had calculated would arrive too late to prevent lodgment. The 47-minute delay had not closed the gap between the U.S. carrier arrival timeline and the lodgment completion timeline. It had narrowed it. Time from first plan suppression fire to assessment complete of Penghu first wave damage, 8 minutes. Time from Penghu damage assessment to first Harpoon portable mode launch, 10 minutes. ROC defensive fires committed. 18 Harpoon portable mode, Penghu, 19 ATACMS from Battery B, 47 Hseongfeng, 3 from 8 batteries, Hai Lung Mark, 48 torpedo, F-16V, AIM 120D, and SDB engagements. Planned first wave, 112 DF-11A against Penghu, 31 intercepted, 81 impacted, 47 CJ, 10 against Penghu, 28 intercepted by F-16V, and PAC-3 combined, 19 impacted. Planned second wave, 73 DF-15B, 52 intercepted, 21 impacted. ROC defensive effects, 1 Type 071 non-survivable from Mark 48 torpedo, 2 Type 052D destroyers degraded, 1 Type 055 cruiser VLS partially disabled, 3 landing ships delayed in staging from ATACMS, closing formation gap that enabled Hai Lung positioning, 4 Type 022 missile boats rendered non-operational, crossing delayed 47 minutes, Echelon reduced from 14 to 12 ships, U.S. systems employed, E-2K early warning, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, ATACMS, PAC-3 MSE interceptors, F-16V airframes, AIM-120D, GBU-39/B, Mark 48 torpedo. All operated by ROC military personnel. No U.S. military personnel were in the Straits engagement zone. No U.S. ship had fired. No U.S. submarine had conducted an attack. The crossing was 47 minutes behind schedule and 86% of its original echelon strength. The carriers were 18 hours away. The lodgment timeline required 3 hours of beachhead establishment before the next U.S. response could affect it. The 47 minutes had not been sufficient. They had been necessary. The portable launch mode authorization at 1:47 a.m. The Hai Lung crew's patience during 11 days of passive positioning. The Battery B crew's emergence from shelter 4 minutes after last impact. 3 decisions that had not been in the model. 3 decisions made by people who had been trained on U.S. equipment and had used what they had when the planned capability was gone. The island had not held the crossing. It had contested it. In the doctrinal language of the ROC military's defense planning, contesting a crossing was not losing. It was the prerequisite for the carrier response that was now 18 hours away. The watch officer noted the 47-minute delay in the operations log. It was the number that would determine whether the next 18 hours mattered.